If you clicked on this video, you're a smart person. I know you're a smart person. You know you're a smart person. And I am sure there are many times in your life where you've asked, do I need a lawyer for this or can I just look it up myself? Especially with tools right now like ChatGPT that makes it so easy for me to find answers to so many different things. You might think I don't need lawyers to help me understand the law or to navigate a courtroom. Well, I'm here to say lawyers have a lot more to offer than you think. I want to focus on three things that lawyers just know a lot more about than the average smart person. First, legal interpretation. Second, the building blocks of law. And third, the complicated rules to be present in court. So, first, as part of our legal training here in the United States, lawyers learn how to conduct both statutory and constitutional interpretation. And what does that mean? When you look at something like a statutory provision that's in your code, your state code, or maybe in ordinances for your city, or in the Constitution itself, a lot of times those words say something, but they don't always say exactly what you might think they mean. And that's because a lot of words have a lot of different meanings. And so, how do judges decide what words mean what, in what context, and how to apply it to what people? And this is such an important skill because this is a lot of what lawyers do. We're trained how to do this by reading case law. In the United States, our law is not just built by the words in our statutes and our Constitution, but by cases that interpret that. So if you are going into court or if you're just trying to understand the Constitution, especially right now where there's a lot of stuff going on with the Constitution, you might ask yourself, I think this is what this means, but what would a judge thinks this means? And that's important because the judges are the ones whose jobs, according to the Constitution, is to interpret the Constitution and help us understand what things mean. Let's take for example the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment restricts the government from having unreasonable searches and seizures. And what does that mean? The word search and seizure seem a little bit more common sense, right? Searching, you're looking for something, you're looking through somebody's belongings, you're looking through their home. Seizure, that you're taking something or you're taking a person, that seems a little bit more common sense. But what does unreasonable mean? What is the limit on this constitutional provision? And there are limits. For example, you know that if you are stopped in a vehicle, that if a police officer sees marijuana in your car and that's not legal in your state, that they can go ahead and search your vehicle. If you don't know that, they can. So there you go. And we found that to be a reasonable search and seizure, even though a warrant hasn't been issued, even though you're not wanted for arrest. And so we only know that because judges have taken the time to interpret what does unreasonable mean in the Constitution. And that's what attorneys do too. They often have to condense vast amounts of case law that interpret certain provisions in statutes or in the Constitution to make sure that they're applying the law accurately and making sure that your case, the facts in your case, best match what a judge would interpret as favorable for you. And if they don't, then they have the ability to advise you on that and tell you, hey, this is not a good case. This is why it's not a good case. And this is what I would advise you to do instead. Lawyers don't just tell you what the law says, they tell you how the law is understood by the people who matter. Have you liked and subscribed yet? Just saying. Another important part of legal training is being able to have these building blocks of law. So every first year law student is required to take certain courses like constitutional law, criminal law. They have to learn about property law, contract law. They have to learn about torts, which is just kind of like personal injury type law. And they have to learn about ethics and they have to learn about civil procedure. This court work is very particular and specific because as you learn these areas of the law, you realize while there's some overlap, there's really distinct principles and doctrines within those laws. And so most lawyers specialize beyond those general areas. However, knowing these general areas of law informs all legal practice and it helps them understand what's going on in different areas, how they're intersecting with each other, why it matters. And the thing is, I think a lot of people can research these areas of law, but if you don't have all of them, it's hard to know where to draw from. So you might be researching your case and thinking, okay, I read all the statutes about this. I read even case law about this. I know what's going on, but you could have huge gaps because you just don't have that context of those building blocks. that you're working from. And so you might not even be aware of issues that might arise or issues that you can have problems with later on. And that's really the heart of the third issue as well, which is the legal system has complicated rules. If you've ever been to court, you know that there are certain rules that have to be followed. And a lot of those are written out in one place, and it'll say the rules of civil procedure or the rules of criminal procedure or the rules of family procedure, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. You might have these different rule sets based on the kind of case you're bringing to the court. What's really interesting is that those are not all the rules. First of all, there's rules that are related to legal doctrines, like I was talking about before. For example, how do you know that you're in the right court? Are you allowed to bring a case like this? Are you the right plaintiff? Are you the right defendant? Who is the parties that need to be named? There are rules that are not in the written out rules of procedure that you have to understand to procedurally bring cases. And this is something that comes up so often in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not only determining whether certain things are constitutional or unconstitutional, a very large chunk of the Supreme Court cases are, can these people be in court? And if they are in court, have they brought the case the correct way? That is a huge issue. And so, likewise, as you are getting involved in court proceedings, there are certain things you have to follow that may not be explicitly written in the rule set you might be looking at. And there's also other rules outside that rule set are written down. So there could be jurisdictional rules based on your state, based on whether you're in federal court, based on whether you are in front of a certain county or a certain city. And they also, many judges have rules that they issue as well. The Supreme Court of a state and the Supreme Court of the United States also can issue standing orders to make modifications for various things. For example, during COVID, a lot of courts issued standing orders about changes in the rules. And those aren't just located in the same location as the rules. You have to go and find these standing orders, often on different websites, different places, to know what and what is not allowed. Do lawyers know all the rules? Absolutely not. In fact, we're constantly consulting with the rules and having to check where things are, and see how those rules change as the law change. However, lawyers have an advantage where they know where to find the rules, like I said, because sometimes those are not the most obvious place. Sometimes it's complicated to learn where those rules are at. And if you go into court as a pro se litigant, meaning that you don't have an attorney representing you, the court will give leniency on making sure that you strictly abide by those rules. But some rules you do have to abide with, regardless if you're pro se or not. And you also have to remember that there's a lot of credibility that comes if you just follow the rules. That's one hurdle a judge doesn't have to think about when they're reviewing your case. Like, oh, this is not formatted correctly, or they didn't do this in a timely manner. And all of those things gives you credibility for the court that allows a judge to really focus on your case and what's going on. You don't need to be alone in the legal system to have to deal with this kind of stuff. And I want to be clear, you don't need a lawyer in every situation. That's why we have small claims courts where lawyers are not allowed, and you may be able to consult with a lawyer. But when you're going to be confronted with accessing the legal system, I would recommend at the minimum always consulting with a lawyer if you have the means or you have access in some other way. And that is because it will always make your case stronger. It will help you understand any sort of pitfalls in your case or any issues that might arise. And it'll also help you have a bigger picture view of where you need to go to make sure you're accessing all the information you need to be successful in court. I also think lawyers are invaluable as experts in our legal landscape. The government is run by mostly lawyers, but a lot of people in the government are not lawyers, and a lot of times laws come out that don't make sense or you don't understand, or you read them and you think they mean one thing, they're being interpreted another way. And it's so important to have lawyers as experts, lawyers who can tell us what's going on with the executive branch. What is the president doing? What is your governor doing? What is going on in the judicial branch? Are judges being fair? Are these judges not credible? Are they applying the law incorrectly? And of course the legislative branch, the people who are actually making the law. What's Congress doing? Are they allowed to make laws like this? Is your state legislature making laws that don't abide with the constitution of your state or the constitution of the United States? Lawyers are available to raise flags about this, and often they are interviewed by the press to be able to explain these issues. We live in a world where lawyers are considered, one more lawyer is too many lawyers. But I just wanted to make the point that lawyers are invaluable and offer to our society something that no one else can really offer. That's all I have today. If you have questions for me, leave them below. I'll see you next time.